One of the learnings I had from the person who inducted me into management several decades ago, I would like to share with you. And he said, no matter how original you think you are, when you begin working on it, you will discover that somebody else has worked on it long before you ever did. You will have many people coming and talking to you, showing to you how original they are. It amuses me. In my younger days, and I have been talking of longitudinal thinking now for over 2 decades, I used to believe that I had discovered something which would immortalize me in the annals of management knowledge. When I did a bibliographical search, I discovered that there were at least 100 texts plus on longitudinal thinking, which is why you notice these slides give all the references, and you will find more of them. One of the essential outcomes of learning should be a true humility, and to realize that no matter how good you are, there are a lot of people just as good, and no matter how original you think you are basically building upon somebody else's work, and in turn therefore somebody will build upon yours. You are a part of a linking chain, and it is very important for you to take your place in the sequence. You do what you are supposed to do, just as others before you did what they did, and others after you will do what they will do. That is how the flow of knowledge takes place. And I discovered that there had been so much work on longitudinal thinking that I am here quoting that it is divided into longitudinal study and longitudinal analysis. You have a chart here which shows to you what are the variables in longitudinal thinking, and they have been classified under organizational structure, organizational process, and organizational growth. These are used to factor variables into issues of technological choice and development. All education is about recognizing the givens of your life, just as all education is recognizing the scope and range of your choices, and as a corollary thereof, exercising those choices in a scientific manner. That is what education is about. And indeed, there can be no purpose in studying organization management if it does not help you to recognize them both, obviously within the scope of the subject matter. The organizational structure has the following components: bureaucracy, span of control, job satisfaction, work design. I am not going to explain these phrases here and now, they will become clearer as the course goes on. But this is an alert to you to recognize in each of these factors there is the longitudinal variable. Bureaucracies are inherited. In fact, the great statement in a bureaucratic environment is, show me the precedence. I consider that a very ugly phrase. If everything needed a precedence, then I could not have been born. But bureaucracy flourishes on it. Show me a precedence. There is a reason for it. I am not condemning it. I am merely citing it as a characteristic of a bureaucratic approach. Similarly, span of control. Span of control has to do with span of concentration. You can only control what you understand. And at each stage, I am giving you my own paraphrase so that you understand that these topics are alive and need to be understood, and cram work does not work in organization management. There are no numbers of valencies which you can memorize and understand how they combine with each other to form a substance. That is again an example of a mechanistic discipline. Organization management is not a mechanistic discipline. Organization management is an organismic discipline. Job satisfaction. There have been learned dissertations on job satisfaction. Even today, there isn't a clear-cut agreement on what exactly are the complete set of variables of job satisfaction. In fact, it is my case that nobody can be in the teaching profession and be good at it and stick in it for a given period of time unless it gives him job satisfaction. Teaching is all about job satisfaction. And I do not have to discuss professions here, which would be a legitimate subject matter of management, but I will get into it under a different head. For the present, I am trying to help you to understand longitudinal thinking, and I wish you to register that longitudinal thinking also affects work design. Organizations which have a very narrow definition of work design will never get done. The person will say, this is an air conditioning job. The air conditioner mechanic will arrive, he will say, the air conditioner is all right, the electrical system is not working. So now you get an electrician. The electrician will arrive and say, the circuits are working, but the MCP is broken. So you get the MCP. The fellow will run and therefore go to the storekeeper. The storekeeper has locked up the door with a nice big lock and disappeared. You trace him, he comes back, he says, where is the authorization to issue you an MCP? So you look for the person who will authorize it. He is in a meeting. So you wait till he comes out of a meeting. Then you keep running around. In the meanwhile, the work is held up. By the time you have got the authorization, the MCP is issued, the MCP is delivered, the electrician fits it up, the electrical circuits are activated, the AC starts working, time is up, everyone is going home. Good luck to you. It is not such an unusual story. All this problem could be solved if you could have a single situation to handle all this. The quality of work design which you create affects the quality of the outcome, and longitudinal variables become a party to it, because that is the way it has been done. Nobody has ever thought it will be done in any different way. We will have occasion to discuss more of this. At the moment, it should be enough for you to recognize that the longitudinal process of decision making affects the present. Then there are the organizational processes. There are organizational policies. Now, this argument is as much abused as used. You do not want to say something, you don't want to do something, simply say the organizational policy does not allow it. And nobody dare ask, and why does not it allow? Oh, I can't help it, it is beyond me. You go to park a car, he would say, yahan nahi aap park kar sakte hai. Why can't I park it here? Because it is not allowed. Why is it not allowed? I don't know, I have been told it is not allowed. I get that answer very often. And if you insist, he will make it personal, and he says he is in the habit of getting into arguments. Organizational efficiency is a casualty at many levels, in many manners, and it affects all our lives. That is what makes organization management such a central discipline for our own living, let alone our own professional progression. The information processing factors. A lot of organizations are known to sit on information. They will not give you the information. There is the issue of knowledge management. There is the issue of change management. There is an issue of the various organizational factors coming in together. All of them are influenced by the longitudinal variables. Now, if you want to put all this together to cause organizational growth, there are two options you will go to. One is use technology, and the other is enhance innovative capability. Therefore, the leverages of organizational growth for your purposes at your level of understanding would be technology and innovative capability, which is why in the third module of this course you have a specific topic to highlight this, which talks of mechanization, computerization, and more of that. Technology is one way in which the performance can be standardized, and you will notice my emphasis on the word one way. There are others, and there can be other ways. And above all, your ability to innovate. Innovation is the ability to do things differently in a shorter, quicker, smarter manner, and that is what growth is all about. Therefore, legacy variables has to do with some understanding of what at least the engineers amongst you would love to comprehend as a mathematical formulation of the legacy factor. Y is equal to mx plus c. Now, I do not have the time, nor do I consider it necessary at the level at which this course is pitched to explain to you what is the difference between y is equal to mx versus y is equal to mx plus c. You should know that, which is why, like any other course, there is a prerequisite of your own level of growth and understanding to understand what this course is about. This is not for toddlers. But what you should be able to register is that if y were equal to mx, then it would be a 45-degree angle, right? It would be a straight angle. No organization begins at 45 degrees angle. Conceive of a 90 degrees situation, a straight horizontal line on which is superimposed a vertical line, you will get a 90 degrees. Am I correct? That 90 degree in y is equal to mx will get divided into 2. So, the y axis and the x axis will have a separator of 45 degrees coming right in between. No organizational growth ever comes that way. Somewhere on the y axis, a point will be where the organization is already there before you join, and that is the constant factor. No organization begins at a 0 level, even if it is a new organization. As I was trying to tell you, people who set it up bring to the organization their own legacy baggages. They will do it that way because that is the way they have always done it. So, y is equal to mx plus c is a mathematical enunciation of the principle of longitudinal thinking. Now, apply all that I have told you so far into this mathematical formulation. It is a managerial intervention to selectively decompose C. I know it is becoming increasingly fashionable to deny your past. It has reached such proportions that even a national newspaper, which is known to be ultra modern, brought out a whole supplement to show how the legacies of this country are languishing both materially and notionally. But this too shall pass. India has a recorded history of over 10,000 years, and India will be still around after most of us won't even be here. So, I do not feel unduly depressed about the situation. But yes, the current tradition style is, if you belong to certain prestigious learning centers, you are up there. If you are a desi bhai like the Gesi girl, you can gyrate, but you will never make the grade. Am I making sense? Which is why Vikrams become Wiki, and all the nicknames. The more foreign the sound, the more honored they are. Am I right? Or is there a exaggeration in what I am saying? Managerial interventions helps you to understand that constant C. It is not my case, and it cannot be the case of any person who reasonably understands longitudinal thinking, that whatever there is in the legacy variable is desirable. It cannot be. Let me repeat that, because there are certain fundamental postulates which will not change with the political climate. And the fundamental postulates are, whether you like it or not, there is a legacy factor everywhere. It does not need your acceptance. Whether you like it or not, you have to come to terms with the givens of your life. The organizations have to come to terms with the givens of their existence. It cannot be anybody's case that since there are outdated things in the legacy factor, you deny the fact that there is a legacy factor. It is saying, if you have a headache, chop off the head. A logic which is very fashionable. But if it is a live entity, surely there must be elements in the legacy factor which are positive and futuristic. Therefore, any constant variable will be a mixed variable with positive elements and not so positive elements. Managerial elements, managerial intervention, managerial processes, managerial analysis should lead you to decompose the constant variable, to recognize what is no longer relevant to the current issues of problem solving and what is relevant. So, you weed out that which is not relevant to the current issues of problem solving, and you reinforce that which is relevant, because that is how organismic granting processes take place. And for grafting to take place, it must be rooted in the system. If you have had any exposure to agriculture, and again I know it is fashionable to talk of agriculture, and just as reprehensible to dirty your hands with soil. There was this seminar I went to where the high and mighty were swearing, I come from an agriculturist's family. My father was a farmer. I did not find anybody who was there actually farming. Because you see, what is the sequence of Indian progression? From the village, you migrate to the bigger village. From the bigger village, you migrate to a basti or a kasbah. From a kasbah, you migrate to a town. From the town you migrate to a city. From a city you migrate to a metropolis. And from the metropolis you migrate and go out of India, you have become really great. Socially you have progressed. So, you begin from your village, you go to a bigger village, you go to a kasbah, the Mufassil area, then you go to some silly place, and I do not want to name any, because people who come from it may feel offended, whereas there is no offense in my mind. And then you graduate to a place like Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, and from Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, you land in New York, and if you are working in New York, you have really arrived. That is how we measure social progression. Now, if you measure social progression that way, you are clearly not identifying with the farmer. You should look at the statistics of where agriculture has grown in the last 10 years, and how much of the national GDP comes from agriculture. If I was teaching you a course on economics, I would have got into it, but I must resist the temptation because I am talking to you on organization management. But those of you who have even a passing introduction to do anything with plants, cereals, cultivation, crops, would realize that even if you have grafting to do of a rose bud or a mango bud, you take out that little bit of a kernel and you embed it in another plant and you make it secure, and it will take root only if the plant has taken consistency with that bud. And of course, those of you who are on the way to New York, or why talk of New York, you could be on your way to Tokyo or London or Frankfurt or Rome, depending upon what your dream is, anywhere but in India. Obviously, you will not understand what I am. And it which is consistent with the nature of the organization. The organization must accept that grafting. The graft must be consistent with grafting. Obviously, if you are doing just, you can't be allergic, or at least I hope you are not allergic to learning. Legacy factors help you to understand what will work in a given organization and what will not in a given organization. It is a question of, I was trying to help you to understand that just as there is a process of grafting, there is a process through which anything can be embedded in an organization. And that is what makes the concept of longitudinal thinking so central. Which is why you can institute any practice which you want, it won't get rooted because people won't use it. If I had the time, I would have discussed with you how slow is organizational change on small matters like having a peon to bring your cup of tea and having a pantry where people go and make their cup of tea and carry it to their table. This is where the nature of the society comes in. Everything is status. If you are a somebody, you can't possibly go and make your cup of tea. And again, if you are a somebody, you have to make a song and dance about it. I see tea being carried 2 floors. So and so ma'am has asked for a cup of tea. So, where is the tea? No, she makes the tea after putting some additional element in it. What additional element does she put? I don't know, sir. She puts in something. And there is no emphasis on the word ma'am, it could be just as well a sir. Everything which you do has to be having an element of status. You are big. The truth is, if you were that big, you didn't have to show you that big. Now, status is a driving force in the Indian organization. People don't accept it, which is why people like fancy jobs. There was a time in the hostels where you had a caretaker. Now, that word has been abolished across many hostels, and the caretaker has become a manager. Nobody likes to be called a caretaker. If you are somebody, you must be at least a manager, a house manager. The job is the same, the salary is the same, but the board painted outside your door now reads house manager. This is the legacy variable. Constant search to raise your profile in your own community drives professional action. And that is a contradiction which many organizations don't understand. In fact, if you kept giving fancy designations to people, they would value that even more than the small measly increments which you give. You like to go back home and say, I am a general manager now. What do you manage? You are doing exactly what you are doing when you are an assistant manager. Doesn't matter, but the designation of a general manager. And I could give you several examples on how that constant variable becomes a determinant of organizational choice. And that is the important factor which many people who try to understand organization management miss, therefore, their interventions do not work. Longitudinal thinking can reveal C, i.e. the factors that impact the dynamics of the relationship between Y and X. And I have just given you several examples, which makes it necessary for me to move on to say that C emerged as a result of the molding influences during the early stages of growth, contextual factors, personality variables, process variables. Now, all this has been explained, and I am merely summing up what I have been saying for the last 10 or 15 minutes. This has to be factorized, scientifically decomposed, and selectively built upon, and this is done by longitudinal thinking, of which I have already given you examples. Any choice the organization makes invariably reflects its past experience. In fact, this is a major difference between pedagogy and andragogy. Pedagogy is the science and the art of teaching children, just as pediatrics is the medical science which treats infants. It would be shocking if an adult was treated with pediatrics. There is a huge difference between adult learning and child learning. This is not the best time to get into it, but this is very important for you to understand as an element to understand how choices are exercised. The adult will never accept a learning unless it is annotated by his experience. It leads me to the 72nd of Gotham's self-laws. I don't have again time to walk you through on what is Gotham's self-law. Don't worry about that. For you, it is important just to register what I am going to say now. That which does not exist in a person's experience, he does not believe it can exist. That is GSL 72. That which does not exist in a person's experience, he believes it is not true. And that is the touchstone of adult learning. You can tell him whatever you want. He won't believe it till he has experienced it. The prices of learning everything through your own experiences are exorbitant. Of course, you are welcome to it. Any choice which the organization makes invariably reflects its learning from its mistakes. The tragedy, however, is bigger than that. Most people don't learn from their mistakes. In fact, most people believe it cannot happen to me. Accidents are meant for other people. How will it happen to me? I can maneuver my bike wherever I want. After all, I have bought the most expensive one. I would have named the most expensive ones, but for the fact that I don't want to promote any brand here. Or something great in sitting, something macho or sitting on that bike. There are two phrases which I think should be a part of the lexicon: macho and facho. Men are supposed to feel macho and the women are supposed to feel facho. What is the ultimate dream of a woman? To dominate the man. And what is the ultimate dream of the man? To dominate the woman. So, he is macho. Silly battles which are fought when you do not understand the facts of life. Organization management helps you to graduate to a higher platform of maturity, therefore, sounder decision making and problem solving, and that is the relevance. The choice that an organization makes is very often with reference to the present state of affairs. I wish it was because of a vision for the future. Because just as you are inheriting something, you in turn will be passing on something as a legacy to another generation. Those will be the people populating the generation who succeed you, and indeed your own children. Therefore, be careful about the legacies which you leave behind. I don't know how many of you have read religious texts in the original. I consider all religious texts classics. Otherwise, they wouldn't have survived for so long. Forget the revelation part of it, and forget the belief part of it, and forget the ritualistic part of it. I am not referring to that. Just the text. You read the Quran, you read the Gita, you read the Guru Granth Sahib, you read the New Testament or the Old Testament, or for that matter, you can refer to any religion. Any book which has survived for n 100 years must be, in literary terms, absolutely evolved. Otherwise, it won't survive. Which reminds me of a statement from Jesus Christ in the New Testament, where Jesus has been just arrested by the Roman soldiers and they are taking him away. This is after the Last Supper. And Peter gets very worked up. And being anything but a soldier, he decides that the only way to fight the Romans is to pull a sword out of the scabbard of a Roman soldier and lunges at a soldier. And of course, he does not know how to use a sword. So, all he succeeds in doing is chopping off the ear of the Roman soldier. And the story goes that Christ touched the ear of the Roman soldier and healed it. One of the many miracles that are attributed to him. Whether you believe it or not is your problem. I wasn't there. I am not going to get into it. But what Christ is supposed to have said next is what strikes me as a classical statement. He said, Peter, sheathe thy sword. And for those of you who don't understand the meaning of the word sheath, this means cover your sword. Those that live by the sword shall perish by the sword. A grand statement which only a Jesus Christ could have made. And however you may look upon his life, I personally think Jesus Christ was certainly one of the most evolved human beings which ever walked this planet. You will bequeath what you live by. And let me add, you will perish by what you live by. People don't understand the power of legacy. What you perpetuate will be what you will fall a victim of. Therefore, be careful on the legacies which you pass on. This is from Feldman, written in 2006. Organizational legacy, or the imprinting that comes from prior work experience in different types of organizations, is expected to affect the subsequent performance of any new firm in systematic and predictable ways. So, it is not as if I am sharing with you my personal belief. There is considerable literature in organization management by people who have researched on it far and wide, which establishes that organization management cannot be understood without understanding the legacy factor or without knowing what longitudinal thinking is about. Organizational legacy, therefore, has several aspects, and one of them is when an individual leaves an organization to pursue an entrepreneurial venture, the new firm's initial endowment will be the knowledge that is embedded in the parent organization. I have explained this in a different sequence earlier on. You should be able to extrapolate that sequence. Remember, earlier on I was talking of people carrying their experience into an organization. I am now talking of organizations, of people carrying experiences out of the organization. The process is the same, and I do not think it is necessary for me to hammer this point. Certain decisions central to the capabilities of a new firm are part of that knowledge. What are they? The design of the organization, the degree of hierarchy and span of control, the institutional routines. For those of you who do not understand the meaning of the word routines, the protocol. If you do not understand what protocol is, procedures. How do you submit an assignment? How do you seek an appointment? How do you report your arrival? How do you take leave? These are all routines. These are the standard operating methods. And of course, there is that all important phrase which helps you to make sense out of things which you do not understand. The phrase that is called organizational culture. A substantial percentage of the founders in the successful 500 companies gathered ideas from their new company while working for their prior employers in the same industry. This has been established by the research done by Mr. Bede in 2000. And again, I go back to annotate what I am saying so that you do understand that there is a lot of serious research which has gone into the making of the concept of longitudinal thinking, and in how many ways has longitudinal thinking been verified. The survival rate of new firm is greater when the founders have prior work experience in incumbent firms, from Klepper and Sleeper of 2005. Like the approach to organization management applied to individuals, the belief that those who have work experience are able to follow management theory and practice far more clearly than people who do not have work experience. And again, I do not want to enter into any debate, but I am just drawing a parallel. If organizations are set up by people who have prior experience, it will work far better than if people who have no work experience are setting up organizations, very much in the same manner in which the individual operates. That was longitudinal thinking. There is a question of longitudinal analysis. And if we are talking of longitudinal thinking and legacy factor in a scientific mode, we need to be very clear on this too. The detailed examination of data and evidence to reveal trends over time reveals patterns in target populations, achievements, behavior, and etc. over time. Now, this is the entire basis of investigation of intelligence work. anything which happens will have to be recognized that there is a predictable pattern. And it is the reading of the pattern which helps people to understand the malaise. Everyone has a predictable way of behavior, and to crack a crime you have to catch on to the style in which the crime is committed. Everything carries a signature, and that signature gets personalized by the way a thing is done. So, it reveals patterns in target population's achievements, behavior over time. Comparison with trend analysis. Switch from trend to longitudinal is simple. Focus on individuals' events, gives a before and after picture. I am sharing with you the methods of organizational analysis, the way in which organizational analysis methodology can be used to do organizational diagnosis. Comparisons with cross-sectional analysis. People make up the population change according to who fits the criteria each year. Longitudinal analysis looks at the same people over time based on whether they fit the criteria at the selected time. These are two different things. In the first case, you are focusing on people, and people make up the population and change according to who fits the criteria. Longitudinal analysis helps you to put it the other way around, that is indeed putting the horse before the cart. It looks at people over time based on whether they fit the criteria at the selected time. This is the foundation of a sound recruitment and selection process. Like many other things around this, also there is a debate, but we shall save ourselves a discussion of the debate. What you need to understand is that you hire a person because he has the skills to do the job. You hire a person because his competencies match the requirements of organizational functioning. Therefore, you should be examining a person for his skills, for his competencies, and if at all you look at his personality, it has to do with whether he has the right temperament to fulfill that role. And of course, the temperament would vary from the type of situation which a person is, even if the nature of the task does not bother. For example, the kind of a teacher you need at a nursery school is not the kind of a teacher you need in a postgraduate course. And if you have a person teaching a postgraduate course with the mentality of a nursery school teacher, then of course God himself can't help you, and vice versa. Trouble begins when you have kindergarten children doing postgraduate courses, and that is a problem of selection again. Remember, physical age has nothing to do with the manner in which a person conducts himself. And if your selection and recruitment procedures are wrong, forget about organizational effectiveness. You can pass anything which you want, you can draw up any legal system which you want, the organization will not survive because it will not have the necessary surpluses to even pay the salaries. And that is a fact you can't argue with. That is the managerial take on longitudinal thinking. Now, this is a chart which helps you to distinguish between the two features which I just analyzed. Recorded data, predicted patterns, observations on A, B and C. This is the trend study which I have been talking about. This is the cohort study. Cohort study is a study of people who are alike, and this is a cross sectional study. Now, if you see, the cohort study is a sequence. The sample remains the same, but the observations vary. In a cross sectional study, the sample can grow in two different ways. C can become B, can become A. C can become D, can become E. Longitudinal analysis deals with cross-sectional study. You understand what a person is about, and when within the limitations of the possible, you transform him to what he should be about. I will repeat that sentence for the sake of clarity. You first analyze what a person is about, and within the limits of the possibility, you transform him to what he should be about, which goes back to a very oft quoted sentence about management. Management is about the art of the possible. Correlation research study that involves repeated observations of the same item over long periods of time, observation in nature, repeated observations at an individual level, enabled to distinguish between short term and long term phenomena. It helps you to answer the question, will this fellow be able to adjust in my organization or won't he? Which is why different organizations have different processes. For example, if you know the working of Society of Jesus, in everyday parlance you will talk of as confirmation, but in the parlance of Society of Jesus you call it the ordination. A priest is ordained a priest after he has served 14 years as a trainee, during which period he is considered a novice, because the issue is large. You have to observe lifelong celibacy. You have to observe lifelong devotion to the cause of the society. You have to accept the fact that you will never acquire property. You have to accept community living. Oh, there is a whole index, and you can live like that for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, and you decide enough is enough. The society would be wrecked if there was early ordination or confirmation, as we do in organizations after a year. We confirm people too soon, and we live unhappily ever after. And then all types of agitational strategies are given birth through, and we ask, what has gone wrong? The surprise is not that something has gone wrong. The surprise is the organization has worked even as long as it has. Therefore, if you want to understand issues of organizational effectiveness, correlating it with longitudinal thinking is a must. There are different types of longitudinal studies. There is the cohort study, there is the panel study, there is the retrospective study. Cohort study, as I said, is a study of samples which are alike. Panel study is the study of a group of people in a given situation. Retrospective study is grouping done after the data is collected. Now, we are not going to discuss this in too great a detail, but it is important that you understand what is the quality of scientific analysis which has gone behind understanding the process of longitudinal thinking. I have quickly tried to expose you to these basic concepts, but if you get the broad trend, that should be good enough. The cohort analysis is a group of people who share a common characteristic or experience within a defined period. The set of individuals entering a system at the same time. It seeks to explain an outcome through exploitation of differences between cohorts. Typical would be a study of Indian IAS cadre. They come in batches, 120, 100, 90, 95. They are assigned cadres. They go through similar experiences. They have similar career growth patterns to a year, to a certain level of evolution, and then it all changes. Practically everyone gets promoted to the level of a deputy secretary to the government of India, and then the funnel starts narrowing at the level of joint secretary and above. And a very large number of people in any batch never make it to the secretary's level. So, if you do a cohort study of a group like IAS cadre, then you get an insight onto how the cadre works. You could do the same thing, say, to the Tata Management Trainee Scheme. But if you are recruiting individually and if you have lateral inductions in an organization, then the story would be different. Then cohort study will not work. It seeks to explain an outcome through exploitation of differences between cohorts. What are the variations of the cohort study? I just want you to note this, because I am not going to discuss this. It is just like giving you a top view of the lay of the land. If I was doing a specialized course in longitudinal thinking, I would have discussed all this, but this is not a course on longitudinal thinking. This is a course on organization management, of which longitudinal thinking is a very important component. In each case, for the sake of your understanding, I have defined it below the box. For example, what is prospective? This defines the group before a study is done. What is a nested case? New case controls are applied to the cohorts that were defined before the study began. What is a household panel? It draws samples of households and survey them. So, the definition is given. You will be able to follow it or not be able to follow it, depending upon how well you have done to understand what organizational management is about and how it is linked with longitudinal studies. Longitudinal thinking and organizational effectiveness in the learning process. Basically, this is something on which research has gone on for the last 30 years, and I will come back to it shortly.